It's now my pleasure to call to the stage Audrey Brooks and Jeff Lieberman. Audrey Brooks, in addition to being an amazing film festival committee member, was Wisconsin's first female public defender. She is a retired judicial officer in Milwaukee County, Wisconsin, a lifelong volunteer and Arizona resident since 2006. She is a past co-chair of JPSA Women's Campaign, the JPSA Community Campaign, and JPSA Women's Philanthropy, and she is the immediate past chair of the Tucson Hebrew Academy Board of Trustees. Jeff L. Lieberman is an Emmy and WGA-nominated director, writer, producer, filmmaker, and journalist. He is the founder of Reemerging Films, whose films include Bella, The Amazing Nina Simone, and Reemerging the Jews of Nigeria. Lieberman was formerly an executive-level TV producer for multiple national outlets. He is next set to direct the feature narrative entitled My Harlem, based on his recent screenplay. Jeff, come on up. And I'll just say, well, Audrey has some questions for Jeff. If you have any questions, I do have some note cards and pencils. Please raise your hand, and I'm happy to bring you a note card and pencil to write your question down, and I will make sure that if there's time, Audrey has the chance to get it.
Wow. Just wow. It's such a pleasure to have you here with us this afternoon.
Thank you.
I really loved this film, but when I first previewed it, you have to understand the committee previews on their computers at home, and that's not exactly a big screen. This screen does justice to Bella and to your film, so thank you. There are a lot of people wearing hats today, and while you don't have a hat on now, you also wear many hats. I've been looking into it. You're a screenwriter, a producer, a cinematographer, an editor, a journalist, and a documentary filmmaker. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey and particularly how you ended up with the last designation, how you got into documentary filmmaking?
That's a good question because it was somewhat accidental. I never really set out to be a documentary filmmaker. I ended up at a production company in Los Angeles in the early 2000s, and we were making the behind-the-scene documentaries, the making of the movies, documentaries that you used to get on DVDs or you would see on HBO. And so I quickly learned that this was a way to make a film that didn't cost as much as making a big feature film with actors and costumes and props and that kind of thing. And also you could do it piecemeal. So you could do an interview at a time, raise some more money, you know. It wasn't as big of a burden to take on all at once. And in terms of the many hats, I think that's just the nature of independent filmmaking, is that you can try and write grants and look for investors and funders, or you can do a lot of it yourself and save some money and cut down on your out-of-pocket expenses. So my very first film about the Jews of Nigeria, I didn't think I was capable of shooting it, but I went ahead and tried, and I didn't think I was capable of editing it. I didn't know how to edit, but I didn't have money to hire an editor either. So I just started, doing the very basic stuff of selecting interview clips and putting things together and hoping an editor would come along, and then suddenly the film was done. So that's sometimes how it works.
I'd really like to know why you chose Bella. But better yet, I'd like to know, with all of the vast amount of information that's available about her, how on earth did you go through all of that information and come up with this film? I mean, that's mind-blowing.
The the first part of the question is easier to answer. Bella was a suggestion from my mom, who's here with me today. She inspired me to be a strong feminist as a child, but she also, more recently, when I finished my last film on Nina Simone, she gave me several ideas, and Bella was one of them. And I was pretty certain that this documentary had been made before, and it turned out that no one had really done this film, which kind of shocked me, surprised me, and made me feel even stronger that it needed to be done, that this information, this legacy, this Jewish hero, that we have so few Jewish women heroes that we sort of uplift enough, that this film should be made. In terms of how and what to choose to put into the film to tell, oftentimes it's a question of what's available. You know, as you can see, I didn't rely on any narration to make the film. I relied completely on interview sound bites, which made it a much more difficult film to make. But you know, I went with the experts, the people who knew her well and could tell her story, and everything that they told me that I was able to weave in made it into the film. And if there were things that I sort of wondered about but couldn't quite get anyone to tell me, those facts didn't make it to the film. The second part is the archival. You know, what images of Bella existed, or what speeches, or what imagery. You know, you never see Bella on the floor of the House, you know, speaking like you would on C-SPAN today. C-SPAN came along in 78 or 79 after Bella's time, so that kind of footage didn't exist. So I wasn't able to include something like that. So it was really going through a lot of archives and seeing what did exist and what I could pull. And I used almost everything that I could find, to be honest.
What I found fascinating was that a question would be raised, and the answer would start with one person, and then it would move to another one seamlessly. I don't know how you did that. How did you do that?
I'm not sure either. It's a lot of trial and error. You know, you kind of play with things, you move them around, you see what works, you see what flows. You see, sometimes you have 10 people talking about the same thing, and then you realize the film is too long, and you have to trim it down, and it just...
Well, I'm glad you listened to your mother. You should always do that.
I try to.
If there were such a thing as a time machine, and if we had one, if you could transplant Bella into today's society, how do you think she would fare?
There's an interesting answer to that question, because when we started making this film, Hillary Clinton was running for office, and Trump was also running for office too. But I thought this is going to be the film to show people how Hillary got here. This is the legacy, you know, to show Hillary's the shoulder shit that she stands on. Obviously, that didn't happen. So we did a turn, and when I started interviewing people and Trump was in office, I asked a lot of people what would Bella had say to Trump today, and we got a lot of fiery answers. And then there really wasn't a place in the film for it, so that didn't make it into the film. And then, you know, the film came out in the Biden years. It's been out about a year and a half. So it's sort of, you know, a different look at Bella, you know, but now we're moving back into where we were 4 years ago. So I think, to answer your question, I think Bella would be on the steps of the Capitol, you know, waving her fist and demanding that we protect the democracy, we uphold justice, that nobody is above the law, that no criminals can get away with the things that some people are getting away with today.
And that we have a constitution.
And we have a constitution, yeah.
I heard a clip of music from the musical Gypsy in the background. And one of the showstoppers in that film is you gotta have a gimmick. Do you think that Bella's wearing of the hats was a gimmick, or do you think she was a hat wearer of her time?
I think both. I think it started off as she liked wearing hats. She looked good in hats. It was an iconic thing. As she says in the film, it sort of established her as a professional in a time when women were not taken seriously as lawyers or professionals. This is going back to the 50s. But I think she also saw it as a trademark. We would call it branding today. She realized when she was running for office that people remembered that lady in the hat. And it became something of, don't forget, vote for the lady in the hat. Oh, here, are you voting for the lady in the hat? You know, there was something about that was very easily recognizable. And then when she was elected, she would be walking down the street in Washington, D.C., and people would recognize her right away. I mean, 435 Congress people, and she was one of the most recognizable in the 1970s. The shocking thing is that how quickly she faded from people's memory in the 80s and 90s. That's something different, but I think the hat really helped establish her.
I'm going to tell you a little story. I graduated from law school in 1971, and I thought I was really hot stuff. I had a job. I had a husband who had a job. I had 2 children. So I thought, well, the next thing to do certainly is to get myself a credit card. So I went to Marshall Field's in Milwaukee. Was a gigantic department store headquartered in Chicago, but Milwaukee had a branch. And I went to the credit department, and guess what? I couldn't get a credit card in my name. Absolutely not. And it wasn't until 3 years later, when the Equal Credit Opportunity Act was passed, and you saw it in the film, that I was able to get my own credit card. That blows my mind. Anyone in the audience have that experience? I rest my case. Right. No, they wouldn't. I don't know where Jen is. Are there any questions from? Oh, good. Good. Thank you. Let's see if I can read it. For many of us, the recent presidential election demonstrated a strong return of misogyny. What are your, I'm not good at this, reading other people's writing, and it's printed. You want to try?
What are your thoughts of how we can use the arts to address this horrible resurgence? Thank you. I think the arts can be quite powerful in gathering people together and activating them. For this film in particular, we thought a lot about the ending. We didn't want it to just Bella dies and that's it, sorry. We really wanted to like throw the hat at you, the audience, and say like, now it's your turn. You need to carry on Bella's legacy and Shirley Chisholm's and all the other amazing activists who are alive or not alive, who, as you just said, want to protect the democracy, and it really depends upon the people. So the only thing the arts can do is to educate, inform, entertain, hopefully do all 3 at the same time, and activate people. We're really happy that this film is co-commissioned by PBS American Masters, and so the film is going to be on PBS this year sometime. So we hope that's another further activation. We hope young people see it too. We think that it's really important that people know that democracy is fragile and that it can, as we're seeing now, can be easily chipped away at. So, you know, please encourage other people to see the film too, because that's the only way we can keep this going, together.
That was a great question. Thank you. I have just one more. Do you have a new project in the works? If so, tell us about it.
Sure. I'm developing, we haven't started filming or quite getting it going yet, but I was recently in DC showing Bella, and I got pitched on a documentary about a photographer who happens to be Jewish, who I met when I was making the Nina Simone film, because he had taken a lot of pictures of Nina Simone in the 1960s. But he had also taken over 2,500 pictures of Elvis Presley when he was 21, the year he got famous. The year when, or the first half of the year when he could still walk down the street in New York and not be mobbed by people. And this photo archive has really never been seen in its full entirety. The photographer's Alfred Wertheimer. He's passed away. But the man who pitched me on the project interviewed him for hours and hours and hours about these photos. And it's a fascinating story of Alfred being hired by RCA to shoot some publicity shots of Elvis. He had never heard of him. He goes that one night, shoots him, is wowed by the reaction, and he just starts showing up every time Elvis is performing or rehearsing or on a train back down to Memphis. And so you have all these very candid photographs. So I think it's going to be a really beautiful story. I'm sort of more known for telling bold social activist stories like Nina Simone and Bella Abzug, so it's a little bit of a different foray, but I think it's going to tackle a lot of important topics as well. And I think it'll be a beautiful film, too.
Well, I've always been an Elvis fan, so I'm looking forward to that. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed speaking with you, and the film is absolutely brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for everyone for coming and for the festival for having me. And we're selling DVDs if anyone's interested in Bella or the amazing Nina Simone. And thanks for coming.